But let me say this to you. Kaya Wanju. Ngan Quell Ted Wilkes. Ngan Yunga Quell Wage. Nit Yunga Maman. Ngan Mam Buja. Wachak Buja. Derbal Yerigan. Nit Yan Ngalangat Badlangan. Ngan Demaga Mangajur. Nidja to Carmen Lawrence. Nidja to our special guests. Nidja to all the Kurlungars, all the kids, and to all of you too as well, ladies and gentlemen. Kaya ngan balarangoni, kaya joking nij kala. Nonak ngalan yini wachak boja ngan jerapan. What I said there was, I'm from this country, and I have a niece here who walked up and said g'day to me. And I know that down through our family connections, we call this our land. This is our Wachak Nunga Butcher. And I want to pay respect to all the elders and all the people who come from this land. And I want to recognise today all of the other people that have come to live on this wonderful piece of land with us. And to share the beauty of it, it certainly is the Garden of Eden that we talk about in another book. But thank you for being friends, thank you for being colleagues. There are some people who walk past us or walk around us today who are a little bit ignorant about what's really required in this world to get on as human beings. Righto? We need compassion and we need tolerance. And I said to Carmen Lawrence just now, I said, how much do we have to pay to get the compassion and the tolerance? Because without that, we can build as many buildings as we like. We can drive as many fast cars as we like. We can get as rich as we like. But if we haven't got compassion and tolerance towards one another, we haven't got a community and we haven't got a society. And for us Aboriginal people at the moment, that's where we sit. Good times. Because the racism that exists around us Indigenous Australians is profound, it's real, and it stinks. Absolutely stinks. And when we see someone who heads up the police union say something about Aboriginal people because he saw one incident, okay, and it was a very unfortunate incident, we don't condone any forms of assault, us Aboriginal people. Okay, there are times when people get a little bit inebriated or a bit angry, because when you live in poverty and you're disadvantaged, sometimes you get that frustrated that you take it out on one another. And when other people come in to try and tell you how to behave, you might get angry towards them. And who are the people that have always been coming in and telling us how to behave? People in uniforms with little blue caps on, and we know that they're there to help us because we do need proper law enforcement. But when they don't know how to do it properly, and when they make broad, sweeping statements that all Aboriginal people are drunks, no good, they're all sexually molesting one another, they're fighting all the time, that's wrong, because not all of us do that. I am, because I'm proud to be this man that stands up and says I'm an Australian, but I'm also a Wachak Nyunga, and I'm proud of that. I'm probably more proud of being a Wachak Nyunga than an Australian at the moment, but I want to be a proud Australian. The Northern Territory intervention, I just want to quickly say to you, it is a racist intervention. Let's get rid of it. Let's get back to having normal ways for people to live their lives. We should be putting in a lot more support than going in with punitive measures like we've got. Having said that, there is a divide in relation to the Aboriginal feelings about it. Some Aboriginal people feel it's a good thing, and I got to say there are some good things about it, but at the end of the day, it's racist legislation that put it in, and it's what the effort that we have to put in now to take that legislation back and put it back in the proper way.
First of all, pay my respects to the Noongar people, the traditional owners of the land, and to acknowledge the very great debt that we owe the Indigenous people of our country, something we don't always talk about in those terms. Today I was asked to speak about the Northern Territory intervention, and in lots of ways it's similar to experiences Aboriginal people have had and are still having. Although it's in a particular place and a particular time, it contains elements with which we're all too sadly familiar. And I guess with many of you I would want to argue that we should thoroughly rethink the basis of the actions in the Northern Territory. which is not to say, as Ted has made clear, that anyone condones violence, that anyone condones sexual abuse, wherever and to whomever it occurs. But to single out those communities, to single out Aboriginal people as if these were problems unique to them, is thoroughly racist, and I don't think there's any other way to say it. The original intervention, as you know, was designed as a military intervention. It had a lot of the characteristics of shock and awe that we saw in Iraq, complete with uniforms and the military apparatus. In fact, the language that the minister of the time used was military. He talked about an intervention, stabilisation, normalisation and exit. These are all the terms that are used in military work. The original call to action, I'd have to say, got a response from a lot of Australians because they wanted to see improvement in a lot of these Indigenous communities who were, some of them, in a grave state. But the original call actually echoed the repeated and identical calls from women, particularly Indigenous women, and from Aboriginal communities over the last 30 years. And I counted at one stage 30 separate reports on these matters, which had resulted in very little or ineffective action. The intervention itself contained at its core a slander that Indigenous culture condoned abuse and violence. And there are sadly a lot of Australians who still think that. It contained too a philosophy that we've heard repeated in recent days with the new leader of the opposition, what he called a new paternalism. I say there was nothing new about it, it was the same old paternalism. And we heard from Amanda Vanstone at the time that what we should do really is get rid of all these cultural museums, the communities in the Northern Territory. That was the philosophy that underpinned the intervention. In intervening, of course, the government of the day ignored most of the recommendations of the Little Children Are Sacred report, which was what was supposed to have triggered it. They did very little of what was recommended in that report, and they particularly didn't regard the recommendation of involving the Indigenous communities as critical as it's currently seen by some at least to be. What we've seen in the Northern Territory has been a fundamentally disempowering intervention. Take away the power from the people who need it. They've removed power and funds from the many functioning communities. They've turned the clock back. There's been no basis for the selection of communities in the first place. How did people get to be included or not? It was totally arbitrary. This is blanket punishment, collective punishment, based on the idea that all blackfellas are the same. And as I say, that's inherently racist and inherently lacking in respect. It reinforces, and I just want to stress this, I'm now working in the field from which I originally came, in psychology. We know from a vast literature across all cultures and nations that people become helpless when you take power away from them. And if you expose them time and time again to unpleasant circumstances, they become even more helpless. It's learned helplessness, it's called. And basically what it means is that people come to believe that it doesn't matter what they do, they can't affect their lives. And they attribute both their successes and their failures to other people. It makes for a grim outcome. It means that they're always looking somewhere else, both for the solutions and for the problems that they face. And it results in poorer health and poorer educational outcome. It's a vicious cycle. People come to act in ways too which confirm their expectations. If you're constantly told you're a hopeless drunk, then ultimately people come to believe and act according to those expectations. The intervention was designed to make people powerless and helpless. It couldn't have been better designed to achieve that outcome. And we know now from people who are looking closely at what's happening there, that's precisely what's going on. We need exactly the reverse recipe. Empowering, giving people control over their lives, supporting them in the way that any community deserves support on law and order, but making sure that the people who design the solutions, the people who do the analysis are Aboriginal people living in community and not a whole stack of bureaucrats. The bureaucrats have proliferated in their thousands in the Northern Territory, and no matter how well-meaning they are not the people with the problem, and they are not the people with the solution. Respect and power.